My name's Claire Aguilar, and I am very, very pleased to moderate this conversation with the filmmakers of Finding Yingying. And today we'll be joined by director Jenny Shi and producers Diane Quon and Brent Huffman. I have to say that this was a film that moved me tremendously. I have to admit that when I first heard about it, I was unsure of how to respond to it because it seemed like a lot of different films that we've seen, especially on different platforms about missing persons, missing young women, and about the probably certainty that they have been abducted. So I was curious to if it would be different, and it was. It was very, very different. It had a different kind of point of view, and it certainly had a different effect. It's a really tragic story, as you know, but on the other hand, there was something very alive about it. And also the thing that I found really important was that I really got to know this young woman, Yingying, the Chinese student who had come to the United States to study, to do research, and had a terrible tragedy befall her. Let's start with Jenny, who is the director. Jenny, can you talk to us about how you not only came to the story, but how you got to know Yingying, and that part is in the film too.
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you, Claire, for having a conversation with us. And for me, Yingying went missing in the summer of 2017. And at that time, I was still a student at Northwestern University. I was in a journalism program, and Brent, he was actually my professor at the time. So when I heard about Ying disappeared, I didn't really think about, making a film. I was just really worried about her own safety, like any other Chinese students. And it was also a big news in China. Like my parents, they kept texting me about my own safety. I was just posting Ying's information online on social media and spread the word. And I think that was like a week after her disappearance. Ying's parents arrived in the US. They went down to Urbana-Champaign area where Ying disappeared, and they wanted to search on their own. So I later found out Ying and we actually went to the same university in China. There were a lot of volunteers from my college alumni association and also from University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. So I also went down to Urbana-Champaign, and for different reasons. One was, I was a journalism student. I was definitely curious about what happened and what was going to happen. And the second reason was, I was just thinking, what I could do to help them. And that's how I met some volunteers in Urbana-Champaign. And one of the volunteers, his name is Shiling Sun. He actually, later became one of the cinematographers and also the co-producer of the film. We got a chance to visit the family, and we also came up the idea of, maybe started document what's going on. And at that time, there were a lot of, reporters covering the story, and we did see, they heavily focused on the crime and also about, the progress in terms of the investigation. But Shilling and we just thought Ying and her family story kind of, got lost during during the whole chaos. So we just feel like, we needed to, keep filming. And I think I just started, visiting the family, once a week, and I got to know Ying's colleagues, friends, and Ying's parents. They talk a lot about who Ying was and shared a lot of, their stories with me. And I think that was later in production. I found out Ying's diary, and I got to read her diary, and that was, the first time I just feel like, I really got to know her, especially reading her experience living in the US. And then, I just kept the filming. And it was, I think like 2 years. I got to know more about Yingying. Yeah.
How did Brent and Diane get involved in the production?
I think Brent should speak first.
Should I start? Okay, so like Jenny said, She was my student. So I'm a documentary filmmaker. My work focuses on China, and I'm a professor at Northwestern, where Jenny was just an incredible student. This started as a class project, and Jenny really kind of threw herself into it. And then I came on as a producer to kind of help craft the story and help it reach a wider audience.
Great.
And I met Jenny through Quon. So the film is a Quon film, and Jenny was a Diverse Voices in Doc fellow. So this is the program that Quon, I think it's been going on now for 6 or 7 years, where they picked between 6 to 8 fellows, first-time filmmakers of color, and that program is actually the same program that Bing Bu had come out of for Minding the Gap. So Jenny was one of those fellows, and she and Brent actually reached out to me when they had a screening of a 25-minute version of the film. And I went to that, and that's when I first saw the footage, but also the first time I met Jenny. And I just was so impressed with what Jenny shot and the way she was telling the story. Just like you said, Claire, I mean, usually you take true crime and so much focus on the crime and the perpetrator, and that's not of interest to me. But I think for me, seeing Jenny's desire to tell Yingying's story really impressed me. And I think it was maybe a month or so, maybe even 2 months later, Jenny reached out to me and asked if I would be open to working with she and Brent and Shalyn. And I said, yeah, especially because knowing that was her focus. One of the things that really impressed me too is I remember us walking and at a film festival, and she shared with me her story, you know, and I learned so much more about an international student experience coming to the United States. And I realized for me that even though I'm a Chinese, I'm an American-born Chinese, that I have my own stereotypes. I have my own feelings. I realized I learned so much from Jenny, and that I can learn from this story.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I think that a lot of colleges now, there are big Chinese student populations because of what has happened with the economy of China, and also wanting to get their young people educated in the U.S. and abroad. When I lived in England, there were lots of Chinese students in England, and their parents had sent them to England too. But I think you don't get to be in the shoes of those students, you know. And I think what's great about this film is you really get to see what it's like to be an international student and how alien it can be. Although I have to say with Jenny, her personality, she seems so open to everything and just wants to, you know, take life by, you know, by the balls, so to speak. You know, that's so sort of crass, but you know, she just has such enthusiasm for life. Her personality is just kind of wonderful. Jenny, how difficult was it to get access to the family? Because, you know, knowing how Chinese culture, that, you know, it's really difficult to kind of show your feelings, especially in this horrible tragedy. I mean, I'm sure you had advantages because you're Chinese yourself, but what was that experience like? And also Shaolin, the boyfriend.
Yeah, so again, we didn't approach them as documentary filmmakers who wanted to make a feature-length film. To be honest, you know, at that time, I didn't even know I'm going to make a feature-length film. I was just thinking maybe you started documenting their journey. So I pitched the idea to them. So basically the family, I feel like, you know, they never, you know, talked to filmmakers before. They're not really, you know, familiar with cameras, things like that. But I think they are kind of open to the idea of documenting the places you used to study, used to work, because they just feel like, you know, that could be something they could bring back to China and share it with their families. As Yingying was the first person in the whole family who went to college and got a master's degree and then pursuing a PhD in the US. So for them, that was really important. And in terms of, you know, documenting their search, they just feel like, you know, when they were searching, maybe they would miss something. So if we could document the process, maybe that could be helpful for the search. So that's how we started. And for me, you know, as you mentioned, I was born and raised in China, and I have, you know, the whole Chinese background. I know how difficult it's gonna be, you know, for them to being on camera. So I would say at first, almost like 70% of the time I spent with them was without camera. And I was very careful about when to turn on the camera, and in certain situations to make decision about whether I would keep filming. So for the family, when Shirley and I were visiting them, you know, they were happy, especially Yingying mom, when they when she saw me. She would like to see, you know, someone around her daughter's age being around. But, you know, just maybe several minutes later, she started to, you know, basically talking about, you know, do you think Ying is still alive? Things like that. So for me, it was very difficult to ask, you know, whether I could film them. So we had a lot of, you know, situations like this. It totally depends on our own ethical decisions. And for me, I had a hard time to make these decisions. And sometimes I just feel like I just couldn't, you know, keep filming. And that was when I reached out to Gordon at Cartoon Films, asked about all the ethical questions. And I also mentioned some situations to Brent and Diane, basically, you know, to get their input, to see what I should do. So for me, that was like a learning process. And I think, you know, the more time I spent with the family, they just got used to me. And every time, you know, when we started filming, we make sure we ask them. And after, you know, after filming with them, we would still ask them about how was the shoot of the day. And they would tell us, you know, what they felt comfortable, what they don't feel comfortable. So basically that's how I build a trust with them. And that's how we interacted with each other in production.
There's a scene in the film, an amazing scene in the film, where when you go back to China with them, they basically break down. You can see how the toll that this has taken on the marriage, where the mother and dad just basically have this screaming argument, and she ends up like breaking dishes, and it's just it's very intense. Because, you know, you can tell that, I mean, you know, the camera is there, but, you know, their emotions are so raw. It shows the kind of trust that they have with you in that. And also just the pain, you know, because it's all there. It's pretty amazing. It'd be good to, I mean,
Jenny, maybe Jenny should talk a little bit about that scene, because I just learned from a Q&A actually, like what actually happened during that scene where the camera went off.
Yeah, so that scene, like I was just filming, you know, their daily life. We started filming when we were eating breakfast. Didn't expect, you know, what's gonna happen next. But all of a sudden, I think they just started to talk about like the rumors, online rumors. And I think both the parents, they got really angry and started to yelling at each other. And all of a sudden, Ying's mom, she just turned over, you know, the table and smashed the balls. And for me, like I was shocked, you know, that was actually happening in front of me. And at first I didn't really know like what to do. So the camera was still rolling. And then I just feel, you know, what I should do. I started to asking myself a lot of, you know, ethical questions, whether I should, you know, stop the fights. But on the other hand, I know, you know, this scene was really important to the story because we really want to show how important Yingying was to the family and how the loss of Yingying has really affect their life, affect everyone around her. But I just made a quick decision. I decided to, you know, turn off the camera and started to try to stop the fight. So when I was visiting Ying's parents, you know, during that time, I had another friend. She was an additional camera person, you know, for the shoot. So she was still kind of like filming, but I was already in the shot, and I was trying to, you know, stop the fight. So that's why, you know, in the actual scene in the film, when you saw Ying's mom like turn over the table, smashing all the stuff, we quickly, you know, cut to a close-up of the broken balls, that was because I was in the shot. So for me, this was a question I always had, what the documentary filmmaker's role, in the film, what kind of responsibility we should take on, and how are we going to, interactive with the participants in the film. And for me, at that moment, I decided, not just being a filmmaker, like filming everything, but being someone really care about their safety and their relationships and their own emotions.
Yeah, I was going to jump in quickly. I think Jenny handled it in the exact right way. But for me, that scene isn't about, like this kind of salacious fight, between Yingying's parents. Like I'm married, I have young children, and to me that's just a really relatable, humanizing moment that that shows that the loss of their daughter, it never ends. Like this is it's a forever kind of evolving emotion, and to me it's so relatable, I think, to see, even though it's raw and even though there's big emotions, they just feel so human, and my heart kind of breaks over and over for them, but really in that moment it shows, I think, what the loss of a child does to a marriage too.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I thought about so many things when I saw that scene. I mean, of any parent who's had a loss, but especially a tragic and violent loss, like everything from Newtown to just to lose a child, even to lose a baby. Yeah, it's very powerful. Jenny, you walk a kind of a fine line in a way, because the film, because you're a narrator and you're a character in the film, and also you're embedded with the family, you kind of act as a bit of a surrogate for Yingying in a way. And I find that really interesting, and that's what makes this a different film than the other kind of true crime, investigative, Keith Morrison, Dateline narrator. You have this, you're a gentle young girl voice, and then when you read the diary, you kind of take on Yingying's persona in a way. I mean, how much of that was a conscious decision? Or I find it very poetic and very beautiful, but I'm not sure. I mean, I think because, you're a journalism student, but then on the other hand, I see this film as it's more than journalism. It's something really unique and different. I just wonder what kind of decisions were put into making those decisions.
I'll first say Jenny never wanted to be in the film. It was like,
Yeah.
definitely was a conversation and having to convince her. So first it was just having her in to see her. This is even before than the whole diary things. So I don't know if you want to talk about that, Jenny. Like,
how did you get into? How did they convince you to be in the film?
Yeah, just like Diane said, I didn't want to be in the film. I didn't plan to be in the film. And that was, what I learned at journalism school. You are supposed to be a fly on the wall, not to, be part of the story, things like that. But I think, there are like different moments in the whole process of making Finding Yingying that made us think about whether I should be in the film. The first time I thought about it was at a work in progress screening at Quon Films, where I showed a 20-minute version of the footage, I put together. And that was in a very, very early stage. We didn't have anything about Yingying herself. So all the footage were about the grieving family. And I think during the Q&A and also the survey, the questionnaire we sent out for feedback, there are some answers about, who was behind the camera, who's making the film, whether are you exploiting your relationship with the family. So that was the first time I realized that, actually people have these ethical questions and curious about who's behind the camera. So we had a conversation in the team and started to think about whether I should reveal my relationship with Yingying and the family. That was something in our mind, but we didn't really, intentionally like shoot like that. And that was later, we were trying to, bring to life, in the film. I was, a narrator, at the time, and we were thinking about maybe hire an actress, to finally, do the voiceover. But again, in a lot of work in progress screenings, audience actually feel like, if it's me like reading Ying's diary, they feel more connected to Ying herself, and that's really working. And for me, as a Chinese international student, I definitely wanted to bring my own experience into the film, and I personally kind of see my own story in Ying's stories, and there's a very clear parallel between Yingying and me. And in the film, I mentioned about my own experience getting into a stranger's car. That happened, within the first month when I first arrived in the U.S. I was very lonely and homesick, and I was just trying to figure out, the situation. And for me, like Yingying, she wrote about that experience in diary, and I just feel like if I could talk about my own experience, the audience would also understand the perspective of Chinese international students. So I think in late post production, we just add like a little by little, So that's how we that's how we got to where we are today.
Yeah, and I would say for quite a long time, we were thinking Jen's voice, this be the temp voice, until we find the real voice to read the diaries. But the more we did, and we did try out other folks reading the diaries, but the more we showed to folks, to audiences in work in progress screenings and the team, I think we all felt Jenny's voice really just felt right to be reading the diary.
The film has those wonderful elements, of your voiceover, and also this kind of this very animated recreation of Yingying's experiences and life, and what it's like living in, it has that real feel of living in, I guess, like Chicago in the Midwest, everything from the snow and everything. But then it does have these kind of investigative journalistic elements, right? Like all the surveillance footage that you got, where you see Yingying getting into the car, into the perpetrator's car, or missing her bus, or things like that, or even the interview of the policeman with the guy. What was that process like of getting all those materials?
So in terms of getting all these materials, we didn't have access to any of this before the trial, because everything was still, under investigation, and everything we're going to review during the trial. So after the trial started, basically the court, they posted, or the evidence they presented in courthouse online. So that's how we got, the firsthand materials of the surveillance tapes, of the court documents. And we actually got a lot of like images of like crime scene, things like that. And for us, one of the biggest challenge, during post-production was about how much crime we want to tell, and how much Ying's story and her family story we wanted to tell. And I have to say, at first, we did include much more crimes in the film than what we see right now. We actually had court exhibits about like the actual crime scene, things like that. And at that time, we just feel like we kind of like watching like two different films. One was an investigation piece. Another one was Ying's diary, her personality, things like that. And I think we had several long discussions in our teams about how we are going to deal with the crime elements. But I think at the end of the day, we basically just agree that as long as the audience understand the basic fact of the crime, that's actually enough. So for us, we try to use these materials to cover the basic facts we thought the audience should know to understand, the case. And even for like specific crime elements, we chose to, include in the film. We intentionally to use those elements that can show Ying's personality. So for example, in the film, there are, several pieces of recordings that the perpetrator talk about the crime process, but we just picked the part that she talked about how hard Ying fought for her life in her last moments of her life. So for us, that was very important, to us. This is not a part that glorifying, the perpetrator. This is actually the part that letting you, to know more about in her personality. So for us, it was like a challenging process, but we are satisfied with what we have right now in terms of the crime and investigation.
Yeah, and actually going back to the use of Jenny's voice, in the old cuts we had, you would hear the perpetrator talking about what he did, or the FBI or the police, and we chose. You'll hear that Jenny actually sometimes actually reads about what happens and is the one that tells what happens, because we wanted to take that away from the perpetrator. We didn't want him to get the attention or the ability to tell the story. So that was another time when we chose to have Jenny to be a voice again.
It's really well done. It's very clear that, you're kind of taking away that, you're giving voice to Yingying, and you're taking away that empowerment that, people have in that genre, whether it's the police, whether it's a perpetrator, you're kind of disempowering it from them and just putting it back onto Yingying. Yeah. But I have to say, it's so moving when you hear him say that, she's fought tooth and nail, like more than any of my other victims. It's like, oh my God, this poor young woman.
Yeah.
What was it like to see? The other thing that I noticed is that the community was very involved too with the search for Yingying, and that was very interesting. I mean, how was that organized? Did that just happen organically because of the school, or what?
I think people, they just wanted to help. They just wanted to help the family, and a lot of them are Chinese immigrants, so they understand how hard it was being a foreign country, not knowing the language and the culture, and you are still going to search for your missing daughter. That was really devastating. So throughout I think the 2 years, there are Chinese local residents. I think they just organize, a team by themselves, and deliver food to the family on a daily basis. And there are also volunteers, not from the Chinese community. They are just, local residents. They cared about Ying and the family. They would visit, the family once in a while, and sometimes they would even, went out and search on their own. So we also followed some of the volunteer searchers who are really nice, and they visited the family in 2017 when it first happened. They were also visiting the family in 2019, 2 years after her disappearance, during the trial, to really support the family. And for us, I think for the film, it is a sad story, but we still want to show the humanity and some kind of hope in the film. So for us, that's just very important to also include some of the local efforts in the film, and to show the humanity behind the tragedy.
Yeah, they really rallied behind them. It's really wonderful to see that energy and what has happened. And how is the family at this time, or can you give us an update on, after this has happened, and then their trial got, their suit was dismissed, right? That's in the epilogue. So how are they doing, and what is happening with them right now?
Yeah, so the whole family and Ying's boyfriend, they went back to China after the trial in 2019. And Ying's boyfriend, he started his volunteer teaching program in a rural area in China, in Guangdong province. So because that was like 2-year program. So he is like finishing the program like this year, later this year, I think. And for the rest of the family, Ying's mom, she's still staying at home. She's not in good, health condition, so she's just staying at home. And Ying's father, he went back and started working as a driver again. During the weekend, he would drive long distance. And Ying's brother, like he was working at a restaurant, but because of COVID, I think a lot of restaurants just shut down. So I just talked to the family last week, and Ying's father told me that Ying's brother, he started working again and as a contractor at a state-owned company, something like that. But the good thing is, Ying's brother, he has a family right now, and he has a son. So for the whole family, especially Ying's mom, she always wanted to take care of her own grandchild, and right now they have a baby. So maybe that could be something bring some joy in it, bring some happiness to the family. Yeah.
Yeah, a new life after such a tragic death. Yeah, I felt bad for the brother because he seemed very traumatized, and as all of them, but him especially, there was just something. So it's good to know that he has a new family and there's new life there. Um, it's such an amazing film, and it's something that I mean I just think um, this is one of the films that I feel like I've gotten to know this person, and unfortunately she's not with us on the planet anymore, but I got to know her, and it's kind of an honor to know her, and it's so terrible that something happened to her. But on the other hand, congratulations, because the film is quite wonderful and very unique. I think we're coming to the end of our time, but there's room to just have a few words from each of you if you want to recap, or is there anything else you want to bring up? So any last words?
I could say something quickly. So, I mean, I thought the film is maybe more important to see now than we ever imagined. In some ways now, because there's so much kind of, hopefully it's ending, but so much anti-Chinese rhetoric and anti-Asian American, this sort of racist rhetoric coming from the Trump administration, really. I think this film that deeply humanizes and I think celebrates Yingying's life is maybe more important now than ever. And I think it's a film that breaks stereotypes too, breaks those negative stereotypes about Asian Americans, and I think really shows, like I said, not only how incredible Yingying was, and is a film that I think, at least for me, you sort of fall in love with this person as you watch the film. You also fall in love with her family and her community, I think, which we talked about, which was just so incredible. So yeah, I hope those are takeaways for people seeing the film now, and I hope those things change when Trump goes away and
Yeah, here.
administration. Yeah, fingers crossed. Yeah.
Yeah. Diane, any?
No, I think Brent said it all. I hope that it humanizes these victims, in all these true crime things, very seldom do we focus on this person, the person that was harmed and their families. People have to continue without their loved ones. So I hope we humanize victims so people don't forget that. That's the probably most critical person in these true crime. But I also hope, as Brent said, that we really can humanize the international student, Asians in general, but the international students. Like I said, I had my stereotypes then. And I know Trump has really tried to put them in a box. So I hope that people come away with a different feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, when you mentioned Fan Ying or Ying Zhang, to me, the first thing come up in my mind is actually her smile, not the crime. And I know, like, for folks that just heard about the crime, maybe when they heard about the name of Ying Zhang, they would think about the heinous crime happened to her. But I'm just so glad that we had a conversation like this today, so more people could hear about Ying's story and her family stories. And I hope some of us can really carry on her spirits. And I have to say, she actually became an inspiration for me. Just thinking about how great she was, and really to see the positive impact behind the tragedy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's so true. So for everybody, thanks very much for joining us in this great conversation. And thanks to you, Jenny, Brent, and Diane. And congratulations on this amazing film. Please, everybody, spread the word about this film because it's so true what you say. You have to really experience and meet these amazing people in this film, even though it's this terrible, heinous crime. It really does celebrate humanity and the gift of life, what we have, and also the relationship that we have with China. It's very edifying. So thank you all. And with that, we'll sign off.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Claire.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you so much, Claire.
Thank you, Claire.